Greetings everyone, my name is Etterville, and welcome back to my Let's Play of A Valley Without Wind. During the last part, I freed the second continent from the tyrannical rule of the Scale Wat overlord RG6-U971. So now with continent number 2 cleared, it's time to move on to the third continent. But before that, we need to open up one of the ports. So I had to install a wind shelter over here so I can open up this port. So now it's time to leave this continent behind. It was definitely a step up in difficulty compared to number 1, as I finally started to lose quite a few characters, but now it's time to move on to the next one. It's too bad that we can't explore these deep sea areas. That would have been nice. Alrighty then, here's the mainland of continent number 3. And continent number 3, yeah, it's kind of a step up in difficulty in terms of other things. For one, now all of these evil overlords' lieutenants are on separate islands that are not connected to each other. As in, they have seas separating them. We have one to the northwest of the overlord's castle, one to the northeast, one to the southeast, and one to the far east. And hilariously enough, the evil overlord's castle is right next door to the settlement here. So that's kind of interesting. But this is going to take quite a few more resources to get across, as they need a lot more wind shelters and ocean buoys in order to cross everything. So there'll be a lot more cutting in between in order to get across. So yeah, at the bottom part of this first part of the continent, which the settlement resides on, we have these volcanoes, the mountains, hilly terrain, icelands, glacier plains, and a desert, ironically enough. So let's view the settlement and see what items that we can purchase and whatnot. I'll be exploring the rest of the settlement at a later part. Of course, I don't have enough materials to make stuff, so yeah, I'll have to go off to find new materials and whatnot. But here are all the spells I could create if I have enough. And soon enough, I really should start creating more of these spells, both to show them off and to show off some better utilities. And I really need to start progressing more on unlocking the shield spells, as they're very useful, and in the correct combinations, they can get quite overpowered. Anyways, while exploring this, I decided to go and embark on this Fix Anachronisms in the Ice Age building mission, in order to get a title pulse 12. Of course, you already saw me doing this before, so I'll be speeding up the footage. For one, like this one and the previous one, it took quite a while in order to complete it correctly, as in find the enemies and whatnot, and plus I had to run back and forth, and the entire building was basically a maze. Yeah, this makes me have a kind of a love-hate relationship between the Fix Anachronisms mission, especially when in a building. In caves, well, not so much. They're fine, but in buildings where you can have a maze-like environment where you have to search everywhere and you have to avoid all the enemies, especially on harder difficulties, and in terms of combat and level design, it can become quite annoying, and your health can drain pretty fast. At least most of these enemies aren't too annoying, to say the least, but it can quite rack up. That's why while doing these missions, I strongly prefer to do these missions while it's in a cave system or outdoors. But other than that, and searching everywhere and using process of elimination, that's about it. Hopefully I'll be able to show the Fix Anachronism missions in the other environments as well, as this is the Ice Age building, and I think we saw this before, so... But they're all generally the same, but they get more crazy the further on you defeat evil lieutenants as monsters start migrating, and yeah, more and more confusion. And as we unlock more monsters, of course, as those golden Scale Wat mages weren't there before until I unlocked them back in the first continent. So the more you unlock, the more you have to memorize, or process eliminate. After all, the more mistakes you make, the longer it takes, and you have to search, comb through everything in order to figure out what new enemies have arrived and what else. And I decided to use the Transmogrify Bat Scroll in order to get across, as I didn't want to have to platform all the way out, of course. Alright, I got Title Pulse 12, which I'll be using quite frequently. Next up is a Destroy Umber Vortex mission in order to get Clinging Factor 12. And here's the entrance. And just like before, just defeat all the enemies or bosses, and you should be fine. Enemies are starting to get a little bit smarter, as I think a few of them will start jumping up around the place. Yeah, as you see over here, the golden skelly bot over there. Yeah, unlike before where where it just stood around and you could only jump, now everyone can jump. This can become quite hazardous for certain enemy types like the Gargants or anything that fires a large shotgun projectile which can now chase you by jumping around. Yeah, this can become quite a problem. Thankfully we won't see it yet. In fact, I actually, during this part, until I discover a few minutes later, about 10 minutes later, I forgot to raise one of the difficulty settings when visiting this continent. But right now, thanks to the difficulty setting and platformer setting right now, it shouldn't be too much of a problem, though as I have repeatedly said over and over, I dread the part where I reach maximum difficulty settings in both platforming and combat. Well, mainly combat. At least for platforming you can have a lot of wood platforms. And now, time to explore this boss tower, of course. And by defeating the boss, I've uncovered another recorder crystal, this time from the 5th Glyph bearer, Celeste Ledsford. He's talking about survivors, specifically about his brother and how his apartment was survived mostly intact right after the cataclysm, although he also mentioned the doubts of surviving afterwards. Considering one of the Glyph bearer messages that we'll get later, yeah, he also fell. All the people who left these Glyph bearer messages, they all eventually died. Which is unfortunate, but it's representative of how cruel this world is. Although, yeah, all your survivors of the settlement can actually die eventually if you send them off to all the missions and they perish. Although the settlement itself will never get destroyed and you have infinite characters, so unlike the sequel of Valley Without Wind 2, there's always a chance to get back. In the sequel, you can completely fail and basically die and get a game over and have to restart from all the way from the beginning. Although that one doesn't really have infinite progression. It's more like a Arcen Games other title like AI War, where there's a definite game cycle. And here's another indoor freefall mission with a lot of spikes and bombs, though it's a little bit easier, thankfully, because the bombs aren't going that much. Or moving that much. And here's where I really wish I actually got more health enchants equipped, so I could actually speed through everything and tank all the damage. Anyways, we've got another recorder crystal from Celeste Ledsford. This time he's talking about how monsters have invaded the way between the apartment and settlement, meaning that he couldn't actually reach his bigger brother then. And they also got isolated by a giant slime, similar to the one that I broke through in the first part of this Let's Play. And they also lost another person, Jane. So yeah, he lost his brother supposedly and Jane, and eventually his own life. So that's quite unfortunate. His or her. Anyway, here's another underground boss assassination mission. You've seen enough of these over and over, so I'll just speed up the footage by about 4 times. But it's intriguing, the story being provided by all these recorder crystals. It's in anachronic order, but it's proving how much more about the Ilari, more about the monsters, the cataclysm, and how some of the survivors have survived. In fact, in the first message from Celeste Ledsford, he or she talked about how their bigger brother survived, along with a cache of other survivors, in an apartment building, a mostly intact apartment building specifically, without having an Ilari stone guarding them. This is alluding to the fact of how we rescued other survivors who weren't protected by Ilari stones in the first place, but somehow were able to avoid being consumed by the wind and or killed by other monsters. But it's interesting though, apparently there are safe areas, although they're not that frequent, and yeah, especially in higher difficulties, survivors can be slaughtered pretty fast. Anyways, here's another freefall mission. And by completing this freefall mission, I've uncovered another recorder crystal, this time from Miles Sunderland, the 9th Glyph bearer. He's talking about the Ilari being key to survival, and him wondering if they're all that remains of the human race, and how that the Glyph bearers are given Ilari stones in order to survive, and how the Ilari are quite mysterious and enigmatic. And they're supposedly on their side, excluding the Dark Ilari. I know there was a message mentioned about the Dark Ilari earlier, but they're still quite mysterious, and we've also seen neutral Ilari, specifically in the first part during the tutorial segment where it healed up our character. So we'll have to see more about the Dark Ilari. Considering how strong the normal Ilari are, being able to shield us from all the wind effects, increased statistics in all characteristics, and the fact that they heal us, and all sorts of other crazy things, it'll be scary to see what a Dark Ilari can do, and or face them in combat. So regardless, it's back to some more missions. I'm mainly doing all these missions in order to restock all my classic spells like Fireball, Tidal Pulse. I'm really using the Clinging Factor spell I got from the Destroy Umber Vortex. It's so useful, especially with speedrunning. At this point, I finally remembered to raise the difficulty setting. Apologies, I was technically supposed to do it the first time I would go into the continent, but I kinda spaced out when I realized how far apart each of the evil lieutenants' castles were. So yeah, time to raise the city building difficulty. Next thing to raise would probably be either platforming or combat. Well, combat specifically. But that'll be safe for Continent 4, and let's see how well that goes. Hopefully the castles won't be so far apart, like in this one. Alright, I've bought all that I need. Now time to place down all the ocean buoys, as well as set up the wind shelters. I'm setting it up in this configuration so that I have more flexibility, and so I can avoid having to do more wind shelter missions. But time to plonk down the wind shelter over here in order to be able to access the evil lieutenant's castle. I could go into it directly, but as you saw from all the deaths that happened in the previous continent, I'm really hesitant at doing it again. So let's place it in these fields and let's go through it. But of course, you already seen me go through these grassland with grove regions, or grassland regions, several times, specifically for wind shelter missions, so I'll just accelerate it. It isn't too bad, but I'm really hoping that later on I can do wind shelter missions in other locations other than the Iceland grasslands. Maybe one in the Scale Wat jungle, one in the ocean, or near the ocean, one in the desert, one in the depths or deeps, or that horrifying location, and a few others once I unlock them. But the Gargants are still as annoying as they were usually. Not as bad as some of the raptors were. Oh. I'm almost dead at this point, but I was successful, so go back to the settlement. And now it's time to move back on to our location where the evil lieutenant is. But first, time to place down all these stat boosters, or basically structure stat boosters, as well as all the shape matters. Might as well, we should boost our own skills, as well as our survivor skills. Right now I just plonk them down wherever is best. It's not like in the sequel it becomes much more important where you should place them. Anyways, time to move on to the evil lieutenant. Just transmogrify into bat and fly across and avoid everything. I really should have also got more mana enchant so I can max it out and fly, use the thunder charge, or basically just bypass everything by just going at Mach speed. Thankfully though, the Mach speed spell, I keep forgetting what the specific name of it is, but essentially the mana cost does not increase as it's always at level 1, so eventually if I go to, for example, upgrade to the level 100, I'll be able to use the spell constantly for, let's say, 30 seconds or a minute. Or if my mana recharge rate gets high enough, I can basically use it infinitely, which may be actually possible if I get the World of Magi characters, as well as certain other ones, as well as certain builds. And yeah, the World of Magi characters are kind of a cornerstone for some of the overpowered builds in this game. Trust me, World of Magi plus shield plus certain enchants, almost virtually unkillable at the equal levels. Although playing at higher difficulty settings and going to higher enemy levels can kind of offset the bounce back into the enemies. But that's kind of in the near future or far future. Especially with all the other Let's Plays I'm doing and this being kind of a side series. This game is fun after all, but considering how repetitive it can get if you don't unlock new environments, yeah, I like to go back to this game every so few months and whatnot. I would have really liked if there was modding, but unfortunately this game and the sequel weren't too successful for Arcen Games. I really would have preferred having more spell gems, and especially enemy types being able to mod. I mean, there are only about 5 or 6 types of bats. I would have loved to have a bat for each type of element, stronger ones, hybrids, and more evil furniture, like the evil furniture environments like the evil gazebo. That would have been hilarious. I mean, considering how this game's environment and world are with the shattered reality, we can have tons of examples for enemies. I mean, you don't even have the horrifying zombie mutants or ninja pirate zombie robots or flying spaghetti monsters. Just think about all the creative enemies you could have. I mean, you can even have evil chairs or we already have evil dinosaurs or all types of evil enemies. There's tons of possibilities and feel like wasted potential there could have been if there were mods. And I wish this game was a little bit more successful, but considering how some of the things feel a bit rough, like the animation graphics, yeah. It's kind of unfortunate because I like the infinite progression systems set by this game. Anyways, let's take care of these enemies first, and then we'll take on the boss. And here's the evil lieutenant, the Scale Wat Giant, who is level 12, WR6-J665. It's weak against water, 30% extra damage, but strong against entropy, 75% resistance. Thankfully though, I already have Untitled Pulse 12, so I can just spam it and dodge all of its attacks, and take care of these smaller gargants. Or whatever they're called. It's been a while since I last played this. And there we go! The first evil lieutenant of the 4 is down. So we're one step closer to freeing Continent 3. But we still need a lot of ocean buoys and wind shelters in order to cross the various oceans and landscapes. Alrighty then, to sum up what I did in this part, I completed some missions in order to upgrade some of my basic level spell gems. I got 3 recorder crystals talking more about the background story. And I was able to explore more of the island by using a combination of ocean buoys as well as the wind shelters. So in the next part, well, more exploration of the land and collecting more materials necessary for buying more buoys and wind shelters. Well then, I thank you all for watching and have a nice day. Doodles!